For Milwaukee Braves fans only shares stories of some loyal fans recalling great memories of the Major League Baseball team from the 1950s and 60s. Co-author Tom Andrews is my special guest next on I Remember. Hi, I'm Jim Peck. Welcome to I Remember. Joining me tonight is Tom Andrews, a former broadcast journalist. He's a communications specialist and self-described sports junkie. Now Tom has co-authored a book dedicated to a particular group of fans and the team they loved. Take a look.
County Stadium was built to attract a Major League Baseball team to Milwaukee. It opened in 1953 as the home of the Braves when the team relocated from Boston. Fans in Milwaukee showed their spirit from the very beginning, giving the team a warm welcome. At the ballpark, attendance records were broken as the fans gave their hearts to the Braves. For the players, the feeling was mutual. The fans will never forget their favorites, including Warren Spahn and Lou Burdett, Del Crandall, Joe Adcock and Red Schoendienst, power hitter Eddie Matthews, who played third base, and of course, a young Hank Aaron, who was among the future Hall of Famers on the team. Fans found the players accessible both at the stadium and in the community. Johnny Logan and Felix Mantilla still call the Milwaukee area home. Fans unable to get to the ballpark listened closely to the games on the radio. Broadcasters Earl Gillespie and Blaine Walsh kept them apprised of the action. Every season was a winning season, but taking the 1957 World Series against the New York Yankees was certainly a highlight. If you grew up as a fan in the 1950s and 60s, you'll identify with stories shared in the book For Milwaukee Braves Fans Only. Co-authors Rich Wolf and Tom Andrews include great memories from those fans and others familiar with the Braves, as well as comments from the players. When the team moved to Atlanta after the 1965 season, it was a heartache for many Milwaukee Braves fans that still resonates today.
I love chapter headings, and this is a special one. When we catch Bill Bartolome, we're going to give him a fair trial, and then we're going to hang him. You know, as somebody went through all this, I can really resonate with that. But tell us a little bit, who was Bill Bartolome, and why do we hate him so much?
Well, you know, Bill Bartolome became a lightning rod. He was the head of the owners group that bought the Braves from Lou Perini. Perini moved the team from Boston to Milwaukee, and then when things were sort of sliding backwards for the team, he looked for a buyer, and Bartolome was part of the group that purchased the Braves. The reason so many people seem to hate him is because, you know, he was after, like his partners, they viewed it as a business proposition, strictly as a business proposition, and the offer to come to Atlanta with all the money from cable television, and I believe Coca-Cola was a major sponsor, and they had a brand new stadium, and it was a kind of a no-brainer business deal for them. In those days, there was no team in the southeastern part of the country. There's no competition.
And Milwaukee was hemmed in by Chicago and by Illinois and Minnesota.
And I think what, you know, I think as a fan, and I was a kid at that time, obviously, but, you know, I think what we resented was, geez, is it only about money? I mean, my gosh, this team, we followed them, we supported them.
Well, it also was that he lied to us. I remember we were here yesterday, we're here today, and we'll be here as long as we're welcome, and they were signing the papers to take that team out. They destroyed Ollie Kuechly. Ollie Kuechly was the sports editor of the Milwaukee Journal, and they convinced Ollie that these rumors are killing us. Ollie, we're not going to leave. You've got to help us. And Ollie wrote a number of columns saying they're not going to leave. And then they pulled up stakes and went.
Yeah,
but
it was awful.
Let's talk a little bit about the good parts. Before I get that, two questions about, you say Bartolome. I always heard Bartolome, so.
I've always pronounced it Bartolome, and I've always heard it pronounced Bartolome.
Well, I hope I'm.
Tomato.
I hope I'm mispronouncing it because I still hate him. Do you think he ever really intended to stay in Milwaukee?
Gosh, that's a great question. I can't speak to his motives, you know, but I can look at it, you know, now that I have a business of my own, and you look at all the parameters of being successful, I can understand why he and his group decided and took a look at the greener pastures of Atlanta and forget sentiment. I mean, they forgot sentiment. I think that was the part that really irked people because we truly loved this baseball team.
That is an essential part. It was a love affair, and it
Yes.
went both ways. You just told me off camera a story about meeting Warren Spahn and saying to him, thank you. And he said,
Thank you, because without fans like you, we would have never had the great time that we had as players. He said, I would not trade playing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin during the 50s and 60s for any other time or place or any other team.
every Brave that I've interviewed, including Warren Spahn, who was my hero, has said that in those years, their mantra was, if you haven't played in Milwaukee, you haven't really played. That because that was such a special thing. How did we manage to build a stadium without a team?
Well, Fred Miller.
really?
Fred Miller was the driving force, and later on the famous movie, if you build it, they will come. That was the concept. He felt that if they
And he
built,
was the Miller Brewing Company.
Yes,
It was
and
family at that time.
Yes, and he felt that if they built a first-class stadium, which at that time Milwaukee County Stadium certainly
Oh,
was,
yeah.
that they would get a team. And if you remember, Lou Perini was not the only person who had his eyes on Milwaukee.
Oh, really?
Bill Veeck had his eyes on him. He was the owner of the St. Louis Browns at that time.
And Bill Veeck had coached
Absolutely.
the old Milwaukee Brewers.
And he knew of Milwaukee's enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Milwaukee had the AAA Milwaukee Brewers, and they were a sensation. They were playing in this rickety old Borchert Field.
Orchard.
But the fans came out in droves and supported the team. So he felt, hey, listen, I can take my team. The Browns had the same problem that the Braves had in Boston. They were languishing in the shadows of the St. Louis Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what the Browns did, they were going to be the ugly stepsister to the St. Louis Cardinals.
And the Red Sox.
And the same thing with the Boston Braves. No matter what they did in Boston, they did have one good year. In 1946, they were in the World Series. They lost, but at least they got there.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, they basically they said they couldn't draw flies
Right.
in terms of attendance.
Right.
So both of these guys saw the enthusiasm for baseball in Milwaukee and this stadium.
No major league team had moved up to that point. So what would have happened if a major league team hadn't come to Milwaukee? We had that big stadium. You're going to put a AAA team in there?
Well, I mean, far worse things have happened.
I suppose.
But I think they were confident that they could get some team to come. And again, he knew of the interest certainly that Bill Veeck had, and later on Lou Perini to bring the Braves from Boston to Milwaukee.
So Fred Miller, and I assume a few other people,
Oh yes.
knew that there was interest in coming here. And that's how they managed to get the stadium built.
Yep. They got the stadium built, and then once they got the stadium built, then the rest was a slam dunk. Just finding it was a matter of which team was going to come, not necessarily would a team come.
How bad were the Braves in '52, the year before they came?
I don't know their exact record, but I do know this: when the Braves came to Milwaukee, they began to overachieve because they fed on the adrenaline rush. Del Crandall told me this. Johnny Logan told me the same thing. Wes Covington said the same thing. When we got to Milwaukee, Del Crandall said, I could have had a worst day of my life. I had a fight with my wife. Things were just going miserable at home, and I'm going to go to the ballpark. And I knew that when I got to County Stadium, my day was going to get a complete 180. You'd get there, and the fans were they adored you. They looked at everything you did. They wanted to emulate you. Their kids wanted to emulate you.
Oh, we cheered for Pop Flies. Anything.
That's about it. So you can't overstate the importance of the enthusiasm of the Milwaukee fans. The players fed on it, and even before they got some of the other ball players that arrived, like Joe Adcock, for example, and they started building up towards 57. They were playing better than they actually were.
And they drew crowds.
One time I asked a guy who was my age, why can't you let go of the Milwaukee Braves? I said, I know I have my reasons, but why can't you let go of the Braves? And he told me, he says, I put it this way. It's kind of like that very first great girlfriend you had. She captivated you, and you can't let that go. Even though you've parted ways since and you've got a totally different life, but it's once in a while there's a smile that runs across your face that your family can't explain.
Well, it was worse than that. If somebody stole the girlfriend, they came and took her away.
Right.
But we gave our hearts to the Braves, and they gave their hearts back to us. It really was, as we talked about a minute ago, it really was a love affair.
Yeah, it was. It was much more than baseball, and that goes back to your original question. Why do people can't stand Bill Bartholomew? Well, he's the face.
Yep.
on that departure.
He's the guy that kidnapped the girl.
Yeah, and so he's the guy that we forget all his partners. I couldn't name you any of his partners, but I can remember him.
I remember talking to Earl Gillespie on this show, and I said, I've never gotten over this. I said, if the Braves, the Atlanta Braves are playing Al Qaeda, I would root for Al Qaeda. And I said, have you gotten past it? And he said, Jim, let me tell you. I said, I was driving through Atlanta recently, and I passed the stadium. And I rolled the window down, and I hung my arm out, and I gave him, that special salute. And I was in tears. I said, here's this white-haired 76-year-old man flipping off a stadium. But we all felt like that. It just was brutal.
And you know what? I don't remember having any negative feelings toward the fans. Because if you remember, and there's a chapter in here written by a Boston Braves fan. And if you recall, what he said is now you people in Milwaukee understand how we felt when the Braves left Boston and went to Milwaukee. He said the only difference was there were 2 million Milwaukee Braves fans and about a dozen of us here in Boston.
Exactly. We were the first team to draw 2 million. We led the majors, if I remember correctly, for 5 straight years in attendance.
And keep in mind, they got that 2 million attendance before they made the additions to County Stadium. If you remember the County Stadium, they extended the upper grandstand on both sides on first and third base. They extended all the way out to the outfield. So they made that 2 million without all those extra seats.
How did you get involved in all this stuff? You were too young to really be part of it, at least when the Braves came here.
Well, my story is, first of all, I was born on March 13th, 1953. And 5 days later, the Boston Braves announced they were moving to Milwaukee. So that's my role. I'm sticking to it. I don't know if there's cause and effect there.
You brought him here, sure.
That's right. But I have no direct recollection of 53, 54, 55, and 56, 57. 58, I am 5 years old. And through the magic of baseball cards and the radio, I was introduced to the Milwaukee Braves. And
too bad it could have been a year earlier when we actually won the pennant.
Well, you know what? Like I said, I don't have any direct recollection of. Of course, I've seen all the highlights now, and I'm very familiar with how the '57 series went. But I remember listening to the '58 World Series, and they're up 3-1, and then how do you boot that kind? Johnny Logan says, we felt sorry for the Yankees. And I said, you know what, Johnny, I love you, guy, but I don't buy it at all.
Johnny wouldn't go easy on his mother if it were a game.
But, so I get interested in baseball cards. And in fact, I'll share a little story with you if you promise not to tell my mom.
It'll be our secret.
Okay, just our little secret. The Braves left in 1965. 2 years later, 67, I was 14. And I remember very clearly getting off the school bus in April. And I realized, I remember it was April because the snow had melted and we were going to play ball. We already had a vacant lot across the street. We were going to play baseball. If it wasn't snowing and if it wasn't below 0, we were going to play baseball. So I get off the bus, and I grew up in Menominee Falls, and I was looking up the street, and I see our house, and behind it there's a plume of smoke, which wasn't terribly unusual because my father had a barrel. They used to burn trash in.
Sure, that's when you could do that.
So I went home, and when you walk in your room and you know that your mom has been spring house cleaning because nothing is where it was. And my instincts just kicked in, and I went to my closet because I had the top shelf all in cigar boxes. This is how we stored our baseball cards by year with a checklist and my entire cabinet gone.
Oh, no.
And I go, Mom, where are my cards? And she says, oh, they're out back. I said, what do you mean out back? Oh, your dad's burning the tree. You were done with those, weren't you?
Oh, no.
Oh, my Lord.
Oh.
So I ran outside to the backyard just in time to see the last little clump of them on the ground burning.
Oh.
And I went absolutely ballistic. Because those are my, and I'll tell you something. When the Braves moved, I stopped collecting baseball cards.
Really?
I became an angry fan, very angry. To this day, I have since replenished most of those cards that I lost. And I love you, Mom, if you're watching. I love you. I've replenished most of those cards, but when you look at what those cards meant to you and everything, and I lost my train of thought here, but that was how I got interested in the ball club, and we collected those cards not because we thought someday they'll be worth anything.
Oh, yeah.
We collected those cards because those guys were our friends.
Yep.
If you went down to Marty's Pizza on Bluemount, you're probably going to run into Eddie Matthews or Del Crandall. If you were shopping downtown on Wisconsin Avenue, you'd run into any number of ball players. And one time Del Crandall told me, he says, what I really loved about the fans in Milwaukee is where I recognized you, they'd give you a tip of the hat or say, "Hi, Del," but they left you alone.
Right.
They left you alone.
Yeah.
They knew you were there. You had a right to shop. Eddie Matthews Jr. told me too. He said went the other way too because they didn't live in a very fancy house in Brookfield. They lived in a nice house, but it was not extravagant. He says fans would be blown away. They'd drive past our house, and there's my dad mowing the lawn, or Eddie Matthews would be washing his car, or if they rang the doorbell, they were amazed that he actually answered the door, and he always had a stack of cards that he had either pre-signed or would sign to somebody if they came to the door.
I'm glad to hear that because he was kind of a quiet guy.
Yeah,
and I
he
never
was.
really got a feeling for his personality. Spahn and Burdette were jokers. They were out. Logan, of course, was everywhere.
Right.
But Eddie Matthews was this kind of quiet guy, and I always hoped that he was a nice guy.
He was, and if you read the chapter written by Eddie Matthews Jr., he'll tell you that his father was a very strict disciplinarian. He says, at Kiss You Goodnight, he'd say, "Did you do your push-ups today?" Okay, let's see 25.
Really? Whoa.
That kind of stuff. He said, if he said, "I'm going to take you out, my shoes had better be shined, and if they weren't shined, you're not going. You're not going with me." That kind of stuff. So he was a disciplinarian. He was a quiet guy, extremely dedicated, and as competitive as it gets. I'm sure you talked to Johnny Logan. The mantra was Johnny Logan starts the fights and Eddie Matthews finishes them.
Johnny's told me, he said, "Yeah, I got into a lot of fights, but he said, I always made sure that Matthews was coming my way before I swung."
Well, maybe you've seen the famous picture where Johnny Logan is cocked, ready to hit Don Drysdale of the Dodgers, because Drysdale threw it. Don Drysdale was famous for if you took the inside corner,
Oh, yeah.
he was going to take it away.
Oh, yeah.
And he's going to throw it at your head.
Yep.
Well, apparently,
And he was a big guy.
in this particular game, I believe there were 2 home runs hit prior, back to back. Here comes Johnny Logan to the plate, and Don Drysdale was in a foul mood. And Johnny Logan says, I got too close to home plate, and he throws at my head. Well, I lost my temper, and I charged the mound before I realized, Drysdale's a big dude.
6.5 feet tall. Yeah.
But he said, you see the picture of me cocking my fist. I'm going to go hit him. But I never landed the punch because Drysdale never got a chance because Eddie Matthews came from the dugout and hit him 3 times before he could even retaliate. And he took 2 guys to pull Eddie Matthews off. That's how tough he was.
I remember he got in a fight. I can't remember who it was, but it was at third base, and either Matthews had slid in hard or the other guy, and they faced off, and Matthews cold cocked him. And they talked about it afterward that Eddie Matthews won the heavyweight boxing championship of the major leagues that day.
This book to me was so much fun because I got a chance to catch up with so many like-minded people. In fact, Jim, you should be in the book.
I should be.
You should have been in the book.
Yeah.
But, it's people recall. It's not a history book. It's not the stats. Those have been done very well. Bob Beege, of course, did a great book, The Milwaukee Braves, A Baseball Eulogy. But this is a collection of reminiscences, just like we're having right now. People saying, we were talking about what it was like going to County Stadium, what it was like, the feeling of when you're a little kid, going to the players' lot. First of all, before the game, when they're coming to get the autographs.
Yeah, and you could do that then.
And a lot of times the players would say, "Come on in," and take them into the dugout, into the clubhouse, and say, "Okay, it's almost game time. You better scatter before the ushers find you." And the kids would go into the ball game. And then after the game, and this is the part that blows people away, because you can't imagine it happening in today's world, going to the players' lot after the game because you knew that Dale Crandall or Eddie Matthews or Hank Aaron lived maybe 20 blocks from your house. Hey, could I get a ride home?
Really?
Sure, take you home.
Wow.
Take you home.
Imagine trying that. I was surprised to learn when I was reading this that Earl Gillespie almost did not get the job of being the play-by-play man.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who the job was offered to first.
I was hoping you'd be able to remember because I
You know,
blocked on it.
Here's my defense. We split up duties. I did not do all the interviews in this book, and that wasn't one
But
of
it
mine.
was somebody. Let's say it was somebody's.
Yeah, and the thing of it was, he was second in line, and he had just done a great job with the Brewers of the AAA team.
Okay.
And Fred Miller was the one who said, you know, come on, we want you to be the voice for the Milwaukee Braves. And it's going to kill me now because I can't remember who the original choice was.
But as I remember it, the guy's wife didn't want to leave the town, and so they ended up offering it to Gillespie.
Could it have been Harry Carey? I'm trying to remember.
No, it wasn't that big a name. I would have remembered that.
Yeah.
But it was someone that, frankly, I'd never heard of.
Right.
But Earl came in, and I think one of my clearest memories of, and everybody will say the same thing, and other people have said it in the book. Summer nights, you'd walk around your neighborhood, and what did you hear? You heard Earl Gillespie and Blaine Walsh calling the game.
Try this one on for size. When I was a little kid, growing up in the Falls, we used to take our bikes, and we'd ride from Good Hope Road all the way out west to Sussex. There was Lannon Quarry, and it was a quarry. It was a rock quarry, a Landstone quarry, and one day they hit water, and the thing filled up the quarry, so they decided to make a beach out of it. And you'd go to the beach, and everybody had a transistor radios.
Yep.
If there was no ball game, you know, usually you were listening to WOKY or something like that, but and everybody had the same stations on. If the Braves were on, everybody had the game. So you'd go to the beach and picture like concert level volume of the ball game. So you never lost track of the game while you were swimming. You got a chance to keep up with the ball game.
How'd you get all the people to write these essays? They're wonderful.
Well, you know, first of all, Rich Wolf, the gentleman Rich Wolf has written about 30 of these books, many of them in the fan series. He's done biography work and such, and Rich was kind enough to ask me to be involved in the project because he was aware of me as a journalist, became aware of me that I am part of the Braves Historical Association, and most of all, that I have a love for the Braves. I grew up, this is my team. He had a number of people through baseball circles and writing other books that the name Milwaukee Braves kept coming up. That's why he called me. He says, you know, do you think a book on the Braves would sell in Wisconsin? And I said, well, to be honest with you, what kind of book are you talking about? Because it's been done. The story's been told. And he says, well, I'm not talking about a history book. I'm talking about fan recollections. I said, no.
Yeah, these are all love letters.
Yeah,
They
that's
really
what
are.
that's what they are. I mean, so we divided and conquered. He knew a number of people. For instance, he knew Milo Hamilton, who was the voice of the Atlanta Braves. If you're not familiar with Milo Hamilton, if you've heard the radio highlight of Henry Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's record in Atlanta, that's Milo Hamilton.
Then I know the voice.
Tom Hamilton, and this is an interesting story. Tom Hamilton is the play-by-play voice of the Cleveland Indians, but Tom Hamilton grew up on a farm in Waterloo, Wisconsin. And he said 3 times this summer, the highlight of our year was when Dad would pack me and my brothers into the pickup and drive to Milwaukee to see Taj Mahal, Milwaukee County Stadium.
How did you get to do, and I think I'm right on this, the eulogy for Warren Spahn?
I did not do that.
You didn't?
That was done by Gary Caruso.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm glad I asked a stupid question.
No, Gary Caruso, who was another diehard Braves fan and went down to Atlanta with the team and worked with the team for many, many years, he was behind the project to get a statue built at Fulton at their stadium.
Used to be Fulton County Stadium.
Fulton County Stadium, to honor Warren Spahn, the greatest pitcher in the franchise's history.
Oh, the greatest left-hander of all time.
And so he spearheaded the fund drive, had the statue made, and the family thought he did such a great job. When at the time that they dedicated the statue, Spahny was already in very declining health.
Yeah.
And so when he showed up in a wheelchair, and it was just a sad time, but Gary did a great job in describing the accomplishments and what Warren Spahn meant to the team and what he meant, you know, you called him your hero. There are a zillion kids who idolized Spahny. Well, the family was so touched by his words that when Spahny did pass away, they contacted Gary and asked him to do the eulogy.
Well, I read that, and for some reason, I just associated this
I'd love to
essay
take credit for it,
with,
but I didn't do it.
With you, yes. Well, that's Spahn was really, I interviewed Warren Spahn. It was a great thrill for me. And I realized as I was talking to him that he was more impressed and treasured more his memories of World War II and what he had done in World War II than anything that happened on the field. That really touched him.
He was at the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes. And received a Battlefield Commission, Purple Heart.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and people don't realize, you know, how the game has changed. I mean, when Spahn was pitching, you know, the thing was, you know, they call it a quality start.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he said, in my day, a quality start was when I shook hands with Del Crandall after the win.
Yes. Yeah, he was
If
expected.
it went 9 innings, if it went
Burdette,
12.
Bob Buell, they were all expected to complete the game.
Yes. Yes.
Or the most famous game in history, I think, went 12 innings. Harvey Haddix threw a no-hitter and Lou Burdette beat him, and they both finished that game.
That's right. In fact, Lou Burdette, after the ball game, was interviewed by the press in the Braves locker room, and he said, "Yeah, Harvey threw a perfect game, but I scattered 12 hits."
Tom Andrews, the book is for Milwaukee Braves fans only. Great book. If you are a great fan, you're going to love it. If you want to find out about what it was like in the 50s and 60s when the Braves were here, you're still going to love it. Tom Andrews, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope you'll join us next time as we continue to remember.